Home Studio Start podcast.
Hey there, and welcome back to the Home Studio Start podcast, your shortcut to being well-informed. Okay, so today we're plunging into, it's a classic dilemma, isn't it, for pretty much every guitarist, every producer out there.
Oh, yeah, that whole debate. Digital amp sims versus, real analog amps.
Exactly, the digital convenience versus that raw tube amp character. It's a big one.
It really is. And what's fascinating, I think, is that it's less about one being definitively better all the time. It's more a strategic choice, really.
Right, like what tool fits the job.
Precisely. It really hinges on what you're trying to achieve with your sound, your recording space, maybe even your creative flow at that moment.
Couldn't agree more. And to help us navigate this sort of app showdown, we're diving deep into a really fantastic article. It's from Rodrigo Marquez's Home Studio Start blog.
Oh, Rodrigo. Home recording made easy. Love his stuff.
Yeah, exactly. The article's called Amp Sims versus Real Amps, which sounds best and when to use each. So our mission today, let's unpack the real nuances here. We'll grab the essential insights from Rodrigo's piece and hopefully help you understand the implications so you can make the best choice for your sound.
Okay, let's dig in.
Sounds good. Yeah, we'll cover the pros, the cons, try to get into the sound and feel differences, and maybe most importantly, look at practical scenarios like when does each one really shine?
Perfect. So let's start with the digital contender. Amp simulation software, amp sims.
Okay.
These aren't just like simple distortion pedals and software anymore, are they? Modern ones are incredibly sophisticated.
Oh, totally. They've come such a long way. They aim to capture everything, the amp circuits, the speaker cabinets, even specific microphone placements, all inside your computer.
It's like a whole virtual rig right there.
Exactly. And the number one advantage,
Yeah.
the one everyone talks about first, it's got to be the convenience. Oh, absolutely. Hands down. Just think about it. You get access to hundreds, maybe thousands of different amp sounds without needing any physical gear.
Right. The space saving alone is huge for home studios. And the cost, buying all those amps, forget it for most people.
Seriously. But it's also about just simplifying the recording process itself. You plug your guitar straight into your audio interface. Boom.
No messing with microphones, no worrying about room acoustics, no sound bleeding everywhere.
Yeah, all those headaches just evaporate.
And speaking of neighbors,
Yeah.
or maybe family, you can record completely silently, headphones on, anytime, middle of the night, whenever inspiration strikes.
It's huge. That accessibility is, it's kind of revolutionary for people in apartments or with tricky schedules.
It really democratizes the whole process.
For sure. And it's not just about getting sounds easily. It's the flexibility after you record. That's massive, too.
You mean like tweaking the sound later?
Yeah, tweaking, but also reamping. You record a clean, dry guitar signal first.
Right, the direct input signal.
Exactly. Then, later, you can send that same performance through completely different amp sims. Or even back out to a real amp if you have one. Imagine deciding months later you want a totally different amp tone without replaying a single note.
That kind of post-production power is incredible. If you think bigger picture, like Rodrigo suggests, amp sims really open doors. They give access to this vast tonal palette that used to be locked behind, serious cache or big studio access.
It shifts the focus, maybe.
Yeah.
Less on collecting gear, more on exploring sound.
Yeah, absolutely. But, like any tech, there are trade-offs. It's not all sunshine and roses.
True. You always hear people, especially like amp purists, say something's missing. What is that? What are they getting at?
Well, I think a big part of it is the physical feel, that interaction. When you stand in front of a tube amp that's pushing air, there's a tactile response, a vibration, a dynamic reaction under your fingers.
Right. The amp breathes almost.
Yeah, exactly. And while sims are getting way better at mimicking that, some players still feel they don't quite capture that organic give and take, the way a real tube amp compresses or blooms when you dig in.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah.
What else? Any other downsides?
Well, there can be a steeper learning curve sometimes. Just plugging into a great real amp might sound amazing instantly. With sims, you often need to spend more time tweaking parameters, matching cabinets, finding the sweet spots.
So it requires a bit more dialing in.
It can, yeah. And you need a reliable computer, a decent audio interface. Get those wrong, and you might run into latency. That annoying delay between playing and hearing.
Ugh, latency.
Oh.
The worst.
Right. And yeah, fundamentally, they are digital emulations. For some players, that philosophical difference matters. They feel something's lost compared to the real thing. Highly subjective, but a valid point for them.
Let's make this concrete. Rodrigo uses an example. Let's call her Sarah. She's recording an album in her tiny apartment.
Okay. Classic home studio scenario.
Right. So she needs different tones, pop, rock, maybe some heavy metal. Buying and miking, say, 3 different physical amps, not going to happen. Space, cost, noise.
Impossible in that situation.
Exactly. But with amp sims,
Suddenly it's possible. She gets all those tones instantly. She can track that heavy guitar solo silently at 1 a.m.
right, saves her time, saves her money, probably saves her relationship with her neighbors too.
Definitely significant. And then there's the reamping flexibility we mentioned. If she later decides that rock tone wasn't quite right.
She just loads up a different sim on the dry track. No re-recording needed. It really does level the playing field.
And Rodrigo adds a really crucial tip here for sim users. Don't just stick to the factory presets.
Oh yeah, good point. Easy trap to fall into.
Definitely. He says, dive into the settings. Experiment with different virtual cabinets and microphone placements. And then he says something really interesting. Often, swapping the cabinet simulation makes a bigger difference to the overall tone than changing the amp head.
Wow. Okay, so focus on the virtual cabin mic as much as the amp model itself.
That's the takeaway. It's a system.
Yeah,
Don't neglect the speaker part of the equation, even virtually.
great tip. Okay, so that's the digital world. But for all that amazing convenience, real amps still exist. They're still coveted. There's a reason they capture so many hearts. This is where it gets really interesting.
There's definitely something compelling there. It's that tangible interaction, I think. Especially with tube amps, they just react to your playing dynamics, your touch, in this incredibly, musical way.
And the speaker cabinet itself, it's not just making sound, it's physically moving air. It interacts with the room acoustics. That adds this whole physical dimension you can actually feel.
Yeah, it's a feedback loop. The sound affects the room, affects the strings, affects how you play. It's alive in a way.
And think about live players, a real amp on stage. That's your monitor. It gives you stage presence. The signal chain is often simpler, more direct, less potential points of failure, maybe.
Could be. And there's just that visceral thrill, isn't there? A great amp, turned up, filling the space, hitting you in the chest. It's powerful.
So beyond just hearing it, there's a connection. Does that physical thing give performers an edge sometimes, like creatively? Does it inspire them differently than a digital rig might?
That's a really deep question. And honestly, for a lot of players, yes, absolutely. That physical feedback, that conversation with the amp, it influences how they play, how they bend notes, their dynamics, the sustain they get. It can be incredibly inspiring.
Or that inspiration comes at a price, usually, literally and figuratively.
Oh, for sure. Let's talk trade-offs for real amps. They can be seriously expensive.
Yep, and heavy. Lugging a tube combo or a head and cab. Ugh.
Right. Your back definitely knows about it. And they need maintenance. Tubes wear out. Things break.
And the volume thing. To get that sweet spot tone, that dynamic reaction we love, you often have to crank them loud. Impractically loud for home recording.
Forget about apartments most of the time. Your neighbors will not be fans.
Definitely not. And recording them properly. That's another skill set. You need the right mics. You need to know where to place them. The room sound becomes a factor.
It's not plug and play like a sim. It takes effort, gear, and some know-how to capture that sound well.
Plus, one amp usually gives you one core sound, maybe a couple of variations. If you need lots of different tones, you need lots of different amps.
Which brings us back to the cost and space issue. Big time.
Okay, let's use Rodrigo's other example, Maria. She's in a high-energy rock band.
Right. Live performance context.
For her, that sound of her specific tube amp, cranked up, pushing air on stage, it's fundamental to the band's energy. She uses the way it compresses and feeds back.
She plays the amp as much as the guitar.
Exactly. She uses her guitar's volume knob to go from clean to dirty, just based on dynamics and the amp's reaction. That interaction is her performance.
And that's something that feels vital for her, for connecting with the audience live. It's responsive. It feels alive under her fingers. It shapes how she performs.
So for that context, the real amp feels essential.
Seems like it for her, yeah.
Now, Rodrigo also has a great tip for recording real amps at home, even if you can't crank them.
Oh, yeah. What's that?
He says, experiment with mic placement, even at lower volumes. Tiny changes, like distance from the speaker cone or the angle of the mic. They can drastically alter the recorded tone.
So even quiet amps can sound big if mic'd correctly.
Exactly. Even a low wattage amp recorded well can sound huge. It's about technique, not just volume.
That's really good advice. Understanding how mics hear the source.
Okay, so we've got the practicalities of the feel, but the million-dollar question, How do they actually sound different? Can you really tell?
The sound itself. Well, look, modern Sims, they've come an incredibly long way. They're really good at capturing the EQ, the distortion texture, the compression, the harmonic stuff.
To the point where in a dense mix, like with drums, bass, vocals,
Mhm.
can anyone actually tell the difference reliably?
Honestly, in a busy mix, it can be genuinely tough. A well-dialed Sim can sound practically identical to a well-recorded real amp in that context.
There's always a but.
There's often a but. Many experienced players do feel there's still a difference, especially in the feel that translates to sound. Particularly when the guitar is more exposed, solo parts, cleaner tones, simpler arrangements.
Okay, so what aspects of the feel translate to audible differences?
It's often about those subtle dynamic responses, how the amp reacts right at the edge of breakup, how harmonics bloom or decay when you vary your picking attack. A real tube amp has this very continuous analog reaction.
And the speaker moving air in a real room. That physical interaction we talked about.
Exactly, that physical movement, the way the sound interacts with the room and reflects back, maybe even causing subtle feedback with the guitar strings. Sims have to emulate all that complex physics.
Which is hard to get perfect.
It's incredibly complex. So while Sims are amazing emulators, some argue they can sometimes feel a bit static or flat in comparison. They might lack that last tiny bit of organic give or unpredictable behavior.
It's interesting how our physical interaction shapes our perception of the sound, isn't it? It's not purely auditory.
Absolutely. What you feel influences how you play, which influences the sound you create, which influences what you hear. It's all connected.
Rodrigo gives a couple of contrasting examples here, too. Like, say you're tracking rhythm guitar for a really heavy, busy metal track.
Okay. High gain, lots of layers.
Right. You need a crushing, tight sound. Both a real high-gain amp, mic'd up well, and a good high-gain Sim can deliver that sound brilliantly. It'll sit perfectly with loud drums and bass. Those super subtle dynamic nuances, they might just get swallowed up in the mix anyway.
Makes sense. The context buries the fine detail.
But now, picture recording something really delicate, like a clean finger-picked part on an acoustic electric guitar going through an amp.
Okay, much more exposed.
Totally. Here, those subtle harmonic details, the way the amp breathes, the sensitivity to touch, that's where the specific character of a real amp's preamp and speaker might become much more noticeable compared to a Sim. The feel difference becomes more audible.
Yeah, in sparse arrangements, those nuances stand out a lot more.
And Rodrigo's tip for comparing them yourself is spot on. He says, use the same guitar, obviously, and try to match the gain and EQ as close as you can between the Sim and the real amp.
Okay, level playing field.
But then, the key is, pay close attention to how the sound responds when you vary your picking attack from soft to hard. Don't just listen to the amount of distortion. Listen to the quality of it, the harmonics, the sustain, the feel under your fingers.
That's how you really start to hear and feel the differences, actively listening for the response.
Exactly. Okay, so we've covered a lot. Pros, cons, sound, feel. Where does this leave us? What does it all mean for you, the listener, trying to decide?
Well, I think the main point Rodrigo makes, and it's crucial, is that it's not about which one is better overall. It's about picking the right tool for the specific job you're doing right now.
Frame it like that, and the choice becomes clear, doesn't it?
It really does. So amp Sims, they are the absolute winners for convenience, flexibility, and silent recording.
No question. If you're in an apartment recording late at night, Sims are your best friend.
Or if you need a massive range of tones on a budget, or for a single project without buying loads of gear.
Yeah, or if you love that reamping flexibility, being able to change sounds completely after tracking.
Or even just for practice with headphones. They're fantastic for all that. Building complex layered sounds, too.
Right. But then, real amps, they still have their place. They excel where that physical presence, that raw power, that tactile feel is really key.
Exactly. Live performance is the obvious one. You need stage volume, reliable monitoring, and for many players, that physical connection to the sound pushing air.
Yeah, it's part of the show, part of the energy.
And in a pro studio with a great room and good mics, recording a killer real amp can capture a certain depth, a dynamic realism that some people still feel is unmatched.
Especially if your signature sound, your core inspiration, comes from interacting with that specific physical amp you love. Playing the real thing might just lead to a better, more inspired performance.
It's about aligning the tool with your goal, right? Is the goal sonic perfection in the mix? Is it practical convenience? Or is it creative inspiration during the performance?
Rodrigo gives those final practical examples too, like producing a complex pop track, layers of clean guitars, crunchy bits, ambient washes.
Yeah.
An amp sim suite is probably perfect. Dial sounds quickly, record silently, tweak easily in the mix. Super efficient for that kind of production.
Makes total sense. But
Playing a loud, high-energy rock gig where you're relying on amp feedback and a dynamic breakup for your stage presence.
then the real amp is probably essential. That physical interaction is part of the instrument for that context.
Right. And Rodrigo's final ultimate tip kind of sums it all up. Don't be afraid to use both.
The hybrid approach.
Yeah. He says lots of pros use sims for some things, maybe layered rhythm parts, clean tones, and real amps for others, like main riffs or solos. It's not either.
You evaluate your current need. Recording silently tonight. Sim. Need maximum tone options fast. Sim. Playing that important big tomorrow. Maybe the real amp. Tracking the killer lead. Maybe the real amp. Maybe a sim.
The situation dictates the best tool. It's about having options and knowing when to use them.
Exactly. It's not a battle, it's a toolkit. Be informed, be strategic, and be open.
So ultimately, the choice really does hinge on your specific needs, your setup, your budget, your creative goals at that moment.
Yep. Sims offer that incredible convenience and flexibility. Perfect for home studios, diverse sounds, silent work.
While real amps bring the raw power, the dynamic feel, the stage presence, that classic amp-in-the-room authenticity.
And by understanding what each does best, you can make informed choices. You can build the right setup for you, whatever you're trying to achieve.
Make sure the gear serves your vision, not the other way around.
Couldn't say it better. And Rodrigo ends his article with a great thought. He says, now go experiment and discover which setup inspires your best playing.
That's the key, isn't it? Inspiration.
It really is. Is the technically best sound the one that sounds perfect in the final mix? Or is it the sound, maybe slightly imperfect, that actually makes you play better, more passionately?
Good question.
Maybe it's a mix of both worlds. Or maybe it's just whatever tool helps you get your creative idea out right here, right now. Food for thought.
Definitely. A perfect thought to leave everyone with. Thanks so much for diving deep with us today.
My pleasure. Thanks, everyone, for joining us on this deep dive.